Let's enjoy the moment. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much for welcoming me tonight. As has been said, I'm Rachel de Souza, the Children's Commissioner, and it's an honour to deliver the Craigmyle lecture here with the Catholic Union, not least because growing up in a Catholic family and Catholic community had such a profound effect on my childhood. That sense of community, that sense of belonging, I've been part of something bigger, our Catholic faith. That's why I want to capture that spirit of my Catholic upbringing, our Catholic upbringings, to find many solutions, to look back and find these solutions to help us improve the lives of England's children, all of England's children, so many of whom really don't have those fundamental tenets of a happy, fulfilling, successful life that we had growing up. So let me start by telling you a little bit about my early life and some of the defining memories that have been defining and foundational for me. So first up here is a picture I hold very close to my heart. This picture is a picture of my mum. She's that little one just there with the other thingies. So that's shortly after she arrived at an orphanage in Bavaria. She's a young girl in the middle of the picture, surrounded by nuns there. My mother was born in 45 to Austrian-Hungarian mother and an East German father who she never met her father. Left in an orphanage near Passau at a year old in the care of nuns with 50 other children just after the war. She had malnutrition, she had hepatitis, she had TB. And even now she looks on those nuns as her mothers and stayed in close touch to them. And they were very much, and as we think about the world and how the world changes, you know, if this happened now, who would be there? So I think it's a very powerful image. Those women of deep faith, they were mothers for her for that time. And what a gift to give a child whose own mother couldn't care for her. Now, you might be wondering what happened next. She came to the UK age 7, an unaccompanied displaced child, to be reunited with her own mother. And I'm forever grateful to this country for that. And it's here she met my dad, who's was a steelworker, a pipe fitter, from an Irish Catholic family, a completely different kind of family. That family came here as workers in the late 1800s. And that's where I arrived. I was born in Scunthorpe with my 3 brothers, a place that grew up around the steelworks. And as the Catholic communities arrived, the first thing they did in Scunthorpe was build the church and then the school. And I went to that school in the 70s, 80s. I was born in the 60s. Just like with my mother, no child was left behind in our community. Families were mom and dad, but more than mom and dad. Families are our first community. Families were our aunties, our uncles, the friends down the road, the person down the road you called your auntie because they were so close to you and looked out for you. You care about the children where you live. And most of all, you know, that community managed to look after its vulnerable, its disadvantaged, and the children whose parents couldn't be there. And so this gave me my first sense of the power of the church as foundational in delivering and improving services. From the beginnings of our school system, and it's great to have our Lord Bishop of Durham here today, the Anglican Church very much set up the British school system. I always say that. It was their generosity, and our Catholic communities grew that and did that as we came with our schools. From the beginnings of our school system, the church has trailed a path for the advancement of educational standards and care of the community's children, all the community's children. But back to me. I went to the local Catholic comprehensive school, St. Bede's, and I've been back a number of times. And like my mother, I was taught by the nuns. I was at times a handful, but they certainly loved my soul. And I'm sure we could all regale ourselves with lots of our nun teacher stories, couldn't we? That they were amazing women. Those nuns did they would do whatever it took to keep me safe and cared for. And they enshrined my lifelong love of education, but they also instilled wider values in me. And I often think back to my time in those schools that shaped the rest of my life. They were formative, surrounded by such inspiring, challenging women. I used to think they were amazing. I'd look at them and think of the education they'd had and where they'd come from, and I'd go help them clean the convent floor on a Saturday morning and make it shine. They were amazing women. And it was no surprise, surrounded by them, that I went on to become a teacher, a head teacher, a defender of children, all our children, their rights and their innocence. After I finished school, as was said, I went on to study philosophy and theology at Heathrock College with the Jesuits. It's amazing. A different time, late 80s, all my classmates were Jesuits, and they were flying off to Chile and to all sorts of places. We need them all to fly back, don't we? We need a bit more done here. But it was an amazing time. And I went on to become a teacher of religious education. Yes, one of Tony Blair's first academy principles that absolutely fit my mission. And then I worked very closely with Michael Gove and the coalition to really make the education reform movement come alive, and with an absolute passion for ensuring disadvantaged students, wherever they were, got the best possible education and setting up my trust. So the Catholic thread, even now after 32 years in the classroom and as Children Commissioner, still is deep within me, providing guidance and purpose. St. Ignatius's reform spirit, that's why I opened with him, is deeply, deeply influenced me. It inspires me still in the strangest of ways in all my work. You know, whenever I have a difficult conversation with a minister, I've had to build 15 schools, you can imagine, about buildings, about what children need. And it seems impossible. I think of St. Ignatius crossing the bridge. He lived next door to the Pope, crossing the bridge to the Pope and knocking on the door and asking for what he wanted. And the Pope would say, no. And he'd go back. And the next morning, Ignatius would get up and do it again and keep on going until he got a yes. And the Pope very rarely ended up saying no in the end. He agreed, probably because he was totally fed up. Ignatius called that storming heaven. I find it a remarkably successful method with the British government. Believe me, I storm heaven regularly and still do. And so it is, after 30 years of trying to improve children's lives, outcomes and experiences on the front line, that I stand here in front of you as Children's Commissioner. I took up the role in March 2021, just as we were emerging from the last of the strictest lockdowns. It was an unprecedented time. It's not always that pleasant to remember it. I went to school every day. One of my schools was on the Norfolk coast, Craigmyle Academy, and I went into Craigmyle Academy every day and looked at what was happening to our children. And, you know, like most schools, we were setting up food banks, delivering beds, trying to make sure that education happened. I'm sure many of you were doing the same thing. I was really worried and deeply concerned about what was happening to children. Now, I'm the sort of person who, if you said mental health, I'd say get an early night, you know, have dinner, get an early night, get up in the morning, you'll be fine. But actually, where I think we are now is a quite different position from before that lockdown. And I am extremely concerned about children. And the fact that I'm going to be mentioning things like their mental health should be a sign to you that we do have a problem, because I was the most traditional, that kind of person you could get. And I'm particularly worried about the most vulnerable. So this impact we knew was happening, but I believe the magnitude and acuity of that impact, I think we are only truly understanding now. And I'm seeing it in the data and as I go around the country. So how could I turn this instinct and sense from the children that I spent the COVID year with into something more fundamental? How could I capture not just those children's voices, but the voices of all of England's children across the whole nation? It's a generation of children who have endured a period of unseen before disruption, well, at least since the 40s. A generation of children who were veterans of a global crisis. And so that's why I launched the Big Ask survey. I wanted to understand, as we were emerging from the shadow of the pandemic, what children needed to thrive, and what I couldn't resist also asking them what they wanted for their futures, their dreams and hopes for their futures, and how we could enable that. They'd seen how colossally frightening life can be, far too young, and had made lots of sacrifices, but they'd endured, bruised, yes, and in many cases seriously vulnerable, but for the most part, happy, optimistic, and ambitious. In fact, 80% of children, when I went out and spoke to the whole nation, said that they were fine, happy, fine. resilient, good. It's the 20% that was seriously vulnerable that I was deeply concerned about. So the survey I did was open to any child in England aged between 4 to 17, and I was determined to reach as many of them as possible. I set my team a great big goal, and Gavin Williamson, the then Education Secretary, said to me, Rachel, there's no way you'll get more than 100,000, even you. And of course, we got 500,000, the biggest survey response ever in the world of children. So, you know, it's good to hear their perceptions. Children were taught about the Big Ask in assemblies and community group activities. And to capture the harder to reach groups, we went to acute children's settings. We went to the children's prisons, every one. Those children were locked up for 22, 23 hours a day. So it was a relief to them. Mental health hospitals, youth custody settings, children's homes. And as I say, in the end, 500,000 responses. We got 500,000 responses. And we were able to break down the answers by all types of characteristic, ethnicity, place, postcode, you know, boy, girl, everything. And the amazing thing is that across age, gender, ethnicity, family income levels, location, and vulnerability, what children told us they wanted was consistent. A good education came very high up. A great job, to feel well, to grow up in a loving family, and to be part of a caring community and have lots of fun things to do. How incredible is that? A voice that came back, a voice of England's children. We so often divide, but actually the voice was consistent and coherent. But it's not enough just to listen, is it? We must also act. So I've used the responses from the Big Ask to shape my work at those 7 themes, and my priorities are the priorities of England's children. So let's start with education. That's where they started. It was clear from children's responses how much they valued their education, how keen they were to get back to school. I got 250,000 text responses. I can tell you a secret. The children love their teachers, especially given the fact they'd be deprived of them. They might not say that now, but they certainly felt that at the end of the pandemic. Children see education as valuable in and of itself, but mainly in their responses, it's a pathway to opportunity. Look, I wanted them to love Dickens and Cicero. I wanted them to love the classics. Actually, they see it as a pathway to a great job. They might look back later, you know, with that, with that pleasure of the depth of education. But actually, what they told me was, this is our way through. This is our way for agency. They told me about their fears that the job market can put a lot of pressure on their experience of education. I can't tell you how shocked I was about how many 8 and 9-year-olds told me they were worried about getting a future job. Did we feel like that? I don't think I thought about that till I was about, 25. I mean, it's, really. I visited tens of thousands of children in their schools across the country. And I can confirm there is no lack of ambition. When I go on that visits, I've met the next Elon Musk, I've met the next 3 prime ministers. Children are they'll tell you about the vulnerabilities, but when I say, who thinks they're going to be better off than their parents? Every hand goes up, and there's a plan, a dream, an ambition. I've also met lots of children whose dream it is to find a meaningful job in their local area. And that's a real concern. Where are the opportunities for me? I want to trade. I want to be able to have a family. It's amazing. About 30% of our responses came down there, and I think we should listen to that. These children wanted to be equipped with the skills they needed to give back to their communities, and they see education as a way to achieving their goals. One young person told me, something that motivates me to go to school is that if I learn today, I can have a very good job when I'm older. Very sensible. We heard that a lot. Schools can transform the way children see themselves in the world and help turn those dreams and aspirations into really tangible opportunities and outcomes. What separates out the very best schools is the level of the belief they have for each and every one of their pupils and the willingness to really make that happen. This belief defined my children. I think my childhood. I think it sits at the heart of the Catholic approach to education and underpins a commitment to both the highest standards and the highest levels of support for the person. And I think that if every adult who worked with children shared this belief, we could go a long way to improving life outcomes for children. We need to strive for every child in every school. Because if there's one thing I've learned, I am constantly surprised by what children can do. 32 years in the classroom. I remember in Tower Hamlets, one of my first teaching jobs, the Bangladeshi community was just arriving in total poverty, and going into the music lesson, there was a little boy with unbelievable musical talent, and he used to listen to Radio 3 every night and loved Schoenberg and atonal music. How does that happen? I mean, the talent of our children is absolutely amazing, and we need to really find each child's talent and to be able to bring that out. And it was because of what children told me that I've made attendance in education a core part of my work. Attendance is such a proxy for both learning, safety, all, children's well-being, being with their peers. When I ask children what they love about school, it's often the school dinner, that teacher I really like, that sport I do after school. And actually, for good mental health, for all the good things we want for children, we need them at school. Now, COVID has really reset the relationship between schools, children, families, and communities, and we have a huge amount of work to do. But we need to maximise the positives and not allow complacency. I've grown hugely concerned about the number of children regularly missing school. Last year, 1.8 million children missed 10% of their schooling. That's persistently absent. That's worse than the year after COVID. It's not getting better, which is extremely concerning. And that means they miss the equivalent of a day a fortnight in school. Nearly 60% of children with a child protection plan are not attending regularly. Half of children in alternative provision and special schools are not back in school. It really is affecting the most vulnerable. Now, over the last 2 years, I've been working steadfastly to go and find the missing children. I thought the best thing to do was to go out and talk to them myself. I've talked to hundreds of them and tried to find out why. And the reasons are complex. For some, the pandemic has led to disengagement. For others, their special educational needs it fell apart in the pandemic. They feel happier at home. They're just not prepared to have a fight back at school. For some, it's anxiety. I talk to parents and adults all the time whose children can't get back. And then there are the ghost children. Now, I don't use the term ghost children, but because they are real flesh and blood. The number of children completely missing education, I'm not talking about those who are happily home educated. That's great. I'm talking about the children who are on the streets and missing, is estimated at over 100,000. And they're the children who are at risk of getting sucked into gangs, criminal exploitation, and all the rest. And we need to do something about this. When a child misses school, not only are their life chances at risk, but they're at greater risk of safeguarding issues, of being unhappy, anxious, lacking routine, stability, belonging. So I would just say that attendance is everyone's business. I've been pulling together in local areas, the police chiefs, the head of the NHS, the head of the NHSs, or everyone in local communities to actually work out a plan to get all our children back. And I think we do all have a duty to support children who are struggling in school and parents. And I think we did a national campaign to support our children back to school. So the number one thing that I'm calling for today is getting our children back to school. I think that way we can support them. But next, I wanted to talk to you about family. The second thing that children talk to me about. Before becoming Children's Commissioner, I was the education reformer. For me, education was the answer to everything. Get a great education, you have agency, we can manage social mobility. I still believe it. But I would say, and I am a believer in the immense power of education, but over the years, and particularly in the last 2 years, I've come to believe there's one institution more powerful, more important, and more transformational for children than school, and that's the family. The Big Ask survey showed that having a loving, stable, supportive family life is extremely important to children. Children believe in family, and it's not just a nuclear family, it's the wider family as well. They talk about their grandparents, their aunts, they define family in the broadest sense. And that's why I was pleased to be commissioned by Kemi Badenoch to undertake an independent family review for government. I wanted to understand how people in this country think of family now, because we hear so much channeled through the newspapers, don't we? Nuclear families, marriage is dead, and we look at the stats, we're worried about it. I wanted to genuinely ask adults in this country and children what families look like, and examine in detail what they thought of them. Again, irrespective of ethnicity, gender, or age, when I asked children and adults to describe family in nationally representative surveys, the most frequently used word was love. Children recognise that family has a protective effect. And I think if you want to go look at our piece of work we did on it, I think we proved it. We proved the protective effect of family. At least the data shows it to be so. The happiness and well-being of adults when they could rely on their family was immense. It was far higher. They share the belief that families have a duty to protect and care for their children. They can see how families insulate us from life's adversity, and they're clear that every child should have the benefits of it. However, my research also showed a fundamental disconnect between how policymakers talk about families and how children see them. All too often, families are seen as households or service users or, nuclear families in that house, whereas children and adults talked about parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, the lady on your road you hold in such high esteem, you call her auntie. I had lots of those. Bet you did too. The government tends to see families for the collection of challenges they face, rather than the innate power they hold. My research shows a strong and loving family can cast a protective net around its members, helping all its members to flourish and those beyond, and stopping problems from turning into crises. When facing challenges, 78% of respondents in our nationally representative surveys told me they turned to family first, friends second, and services third, with services then wanting to feel familial, local, grounded in the community. You all know this only too well. Our review evidenced a strong link between parenting behaviours and child outcomes. People ask me all the time, Rachel, you were a teacher for all those years and you're the Children Commissioner. Should we bring our children up strictly, or should we be permissive and liberal and let them call me George? Actually, what the data showed us was neither of those matter. What mattered, so what came out very, very strongly, was that parents who spent time and play with their children, or spent time with their children, had an impact on child outcomes, setting boundaries. And one I would say is no phones to bed at night. But anyway, setting boundaries. And actually reading and doing the homework helps too. But it's those boundaries and that time that helps children through their life challenges and helped create some of the happiest children. And again, do look back at our research on that, because it was quite profound. So don't worry which side you land on. It's those simple things that matter. One of the most important insights from the family review was that all parents have some struggles. It's hard being a parent, and at times we all need to reach out for help. Acknowledging this is a vital prerequisite for changing the relationship between the state and families, but it starts not with government policy, but with all of us. We all need to be more vocal about the importance of family. And again, I can commend the Bishop of Durham's research on the family as well, which was excellent and came up with some very, very similar views to ours. I'm sure that in a room of people who are deeply aware of the joy, we're deeply aware of the joy and power held within families. We understand that strong families are the fabric of any healthy society, but also that families should be able to get help without facing judgment. Families need to be able to turn to their community when they face the inevitable struggles that parenthood brings, whether that's turning to their parish, whether it's to their neighbours, whether it's to their family support services. If a child is unhappy at home, they are over 9 times more likely to be unhappy overall. It is fundamental that we support families and children. And that's why I wanted us to talk about families in the same way that children do. In our family review, one young boy told me, "A loving family is worth more than money and will give you guidance, support, love and advice." He was exactly right. So on to community, the third theme that children brought in my survey. Children told me how vital it is we create warm and welcoming communities. The Big Ask also showed us that this generation of children are civic-minded, social and outward-looking. that none of this that you see on all this negativity we see on the media is not right at all. They were such hopeful, positive, creatures, really. It was amazing to read their thoughts. And after a long period of isolation, children told me they were desperate to feel part of something larger than themselves, a caring community, like that community I talked about that I belonged to as a child. In the Big S, thousands of children spoke about the importance of playing out. Children wanted a place to play, fun things to do that they could afford, whether it was cricket in Crawley and Luton, karate in Newcastle, dance lessons in Lewisham. They wanted to play. And actually, a lot of them were just, please open the local park. We want to get out and play. Children recounted countless times the importance of clubs, the people who lead them, the youth workers and that wider fabric around them, and the activities in their local areas. Some children also confided that they had deep concerns about their safety. Tackling online sexual abuse and harassment among young people quickly became a priority for me. In the first year, the government asked me to look at children's safety online, especially in response to the Everyone's Invited movement. There was real concern, and we started asking those questions. How can we keep children safe? How can we keep children safe online? And I think a Pandora's box was open. My research found that children are exposed to various forms of harmful content online, which simply wouldn't be allowed to cross their path in the offline world. They simply would not have access to it. According to another national survey we did, 45% of children aged 8 to 17 have seen content they felt was inappropriate or made them worried or upset. I've grown increasingly concerned about the normalization of sexual violence in online pornography. It's not top shelf magazine stuff. It's deeply serious, insidious, terrible material that children are getting absolute free access to. And it's changing the way they think about relationships and the way they think about sexual relationships. And they're seeing it far too young. From my research, we've learned the average age at which children see pornography is 13, with many 8 and 9-year-olds seeing it too. Now, children are often not even seeking out this content. They've been shown it on someone's phone in the playground, or they're coming across it. Most of them, 38% of 16 to 21-year-olds say that they first saw it accidentally online. The first place they see it is Twitter. It's often on Snapchat, it's often on TikTok. We don't see that when we're on Twitter because we're in our nice little algorithms for us. But actually, it really is deeply disturbing stuff. It's unacceptable. And I believe when faced with these challenges, we have to ask, what kind of world are we creating for our children? Now, I'll continue my work in holding big tech to account. I bring them all in, the big six, TikTok, Google, all of them. They have to meet me every 6 months. They send QCs. I only allow them to speak for 10 minutes each, because otherwise they're full of excuses. And then I show them what I found. We need to make sure that they are held to account. But I also think there's a role for those of us who children trust. Yes, we've got the online safety bill, and that hopefully that will protect children, but it's never going to do the job that a family or trusted adults can do. And I think we should be playing a much more active role in restricting harmful material online. And we have a duty to teach children about healthy relationships and support them to grow up into respectful and caring adults. When I asked 16 to 21-year-olds what they wish their parents had known, I brought 100 of them from King's College, from a range of sixth formers into the DFE, into the basement to the DFE. It caused some eyebrows to raise. And I asked them, what did they wish their parents had known about social media? They were the first generation to go on it. And do you know what they told me? They wish they'd not had phones too young. They wish they'd not been on these social media sites at the age they were. They needed their parents to help them set boundaries, especially as older teenagers, and that they would not allow their own children on these sites or to have phones. I think that's very interesting. Let's see how that plays out. Children value their communities, often online. They're also importantly making sure children are cherished and that they trust those of us whose job it is to keep them safe. And I want to just briefly mention mental health in this context. Mental health is an important discussion in its own sake. And as I say, I was perhaps quite a skeptic as a head teacher, thinking that, healthy living, being at school actually was a key solution, and it often is. But these online harms have far-reaching consequences for children's mental health. I've spoken to many of the parents whose children have killed themselves and have been in media, the media campaigns, the Molly Rose's parents, and you just realize the impact. When you speak to Molly Rose's father and how he found, when he looked through the mobile phone of his daughter who took her own life, lovely young teenager, and looked at the material she was scrolling through, the thousands of posts before she took her own life that even made the coroner and the psychologist feel unwell. He just could not believe that happened to his own daughter in his own house. And you only need a few of those conversations to realize how far-reaching the consequences are for children's mental health, whether it's pornography, violence, or content that promotes self-harm. I've seen firsthand how it can lead to immense distress for children. Mental health was, interestingly, and not in my words, that they came up with this themselves, was their biggest worry overall just after the pandemic. While most children were happy, 1 in 5 were worried about their well-being. They used language like well-being, mental health, anxiety. They use that language, they blur it all into one in a way that we just wouldn't. We're just not fluent really in that language, our age group. Maybe you are, I wasn't. I wouldn't have even thought of it like that. But they are talking in this way. Now, while it's important that children can access clinical mental health support when they need it, when I think about children's mental health, it's clear to me we need to think holistically about them as children. So much of a child's well-being will be down to things such as their relationships with family and friends, their participation in education, or just simply their sense of purpose and hope about life. And that comes out so strongly from their responses. I've spoken to so many children about what support they need when they feel anxious, or they're starting, not just a bad day, but they're starting to really, really feel anxious and worried. And their answer is clear. They want adults they can turn to and confide in. We know children want to access the right support in a setting familiar to them, and that's why this year I'm going to be doing a deep dive into pastoral support. And again, so many Catholic schools define their duty to their community, not only in terms of the quality of academic education, but with respect to the social and emotional development of their children. That is right, and we need to do more of it. I phoned up my good pal when I'm coming out of the pandemic, Sarah Jane Blakemore, who wrote The Teenage Brain. She's a neuroscientist at Oxford University. I said, what do I need to do to get children's mental health right? And she said, they need a small number of really good peer relationships and to be actually with their peers every day. I think that attendance message is coming back, isn't it? That's what they need to do. Social care then. So when I was thinking about making England the best place to grow up, I always start with thinking about the life chances of children in care. As Children's Commissioner, it's my duty and I feel a personal responsibility for the safety and well-being of children in care, looked after children. And my mum was one, so I feel it strongly. I was determined to give them a voice through the big ask. And so I reached out to children's home, kinship carers, foster carers, social workers, anyone who plays a role in supporting and caring for these children. There are, there are over 100,000 children in care, 13,000, and many, many more with a social worker. And in terms of our survey, 6,000 responded and 13,000 children with a social worker responded. So we had a really good evidence base. Do you know what they told us? They told us they had exactly the same aspirations and ambitions as all the other children did, but they need even stronger foundations. They want to grow up in loving homes. They want a family. The biggest ambition for children in care for the future was to have a family. They want to be able to access a brilliant education, to have their health needs met and to be supported into adulthood and have just one person who's with them right through till they grow up. Just one, please. They are no less ambitious than other children, but they felt more acutely that their ambition wasn't always matched by those around them. Now, I want every child to grow up in a loving family, even if it can't be with their biological one. I've heard from so many children who love and care for their adoptive, foster or kinship family, and I want that especially for those who need it most. And I urge the Catholic community to really step back in. We've had to move out because of lots of the changes in the way that fostering was done in local authorities. We've seen so many charities have to vacate. We need to step back in. These children need forever families, and they really do need us for this. And this includes children arriving in the UK, seeking refuge from conflict, being persecution, or as victims of human trafficking and exploitation. So I've been quite vocal with others about the illegal migration bill. It's now been enacted. Since this bill was first introduced, I've been deeply concerned about the impact it will have on some of our most vulnerable children, those who've been trafficked, fled persecution and abuse, and arrived on our shores in need of protection. Now, I visit the Kent Intake Centre where these children get off the boat. So I see the 8-year-olds, I see the Down syndrome child getting off the boat. I see the children from Eritrea. I saw a Christian Eritrean girl the last time I was down there with an older young man who was not, she was under 18, who was not any relative of hers. I was extremely concerned. These children are very, very vulnerable. I've talked to the Iranian boy whose parents were killed and the traffickers just put him in. He was given to the traffickers. He didn't know he was coming to England. He's not trying to come here for a job. And no doubt some are trying to sort of use the system, but they're under 18, they're children, and we need to look after them. And I feel that extremely strongly. I am very concerned about what's happening to them. Now, any government is going to try and stop the dangerous small boat crossings from happening. Any government would, and do not put my nose into sort of the politics around that. But my job is to make sure the children are looked after properly. I don't want any child arriving here in a small boat, but if they do, we have to keep them safe. Especially, as so many of them experience war, persecution and trauma when they arrive on our shores. And again, I'm really interested to think how we can step up in specialist fostering and other ways of taking these individual children into our families and making them forever families. The only concession the Bishop of Durham and I got from the government on the illegal migration bill was that if a child comes in and is adopted or fostered long term, they won't be deported at 18. They can stay with that family. Seems to me a very important concession, that one. So I remain certain that changes are required to avoid devastating consequences for some of the most vulnerable children I've met, and I'll continue to advocate with others for an improved piece of legislation which protects and enshrines the rights of children. But I do think we need to do more as a community, as a society, to provide the kind of support, care and welcome that I talked about both my mother receiving, that I received growing up in a Catholic community in the North. That community around you, the care, the wider support. As a result, this was not a result of the state. The care for me and my family was not a result of the state. It was a result of the church, those great individuals in the church, because that's what the church is, coming together to show compassion and love. One of my most important aims is for no child to live in an institution. These settings struggle to provide the kind of caring, familiar environment children say they want and we know they need. And it's central to my role to hear from children, but particularly those who are living in institutions. Over the last couple of years, my team and I have visited every single young offender institution. We have over 500 children in prison in this country. They've often done heinous, terrible things. It's a much smaller number than it was. Before Christmas, we visited every single child, every single institution. On a Saturday, I have a statutory power to enter any building where there's a child and to check whether they were getting their family visiting and whether anybody was coming to see them. All I can say is I have serious concerns about the safety and condition of the children's secure estate. Some of the things we've seen are completely shocking: chaos, violence, and a race to the bottom. I'm now working with all the governors to set up Young People's Voice so that they can actually talk and say what they need, particularly around their families. We must do better for these children, otherwise it's going to end up with a lifetime of crime and not being resolved, and an absolute desperate situation. It's our duty to protect all children, especially those with additional vulnerabilities, and I know it's something we take seriously. So I would say every one of us has a role to play in creating a society where children can flourish. Children have told me they don't believe it's simply the role of the state to do that. They've talked about community, and I believe the church too has an important role in shaping the world we want them to live in. The Catholic Union's played a key role in defending the common good and helping to shape the national conversation. So I want to put a series of challenges to us tonight. Each morning I wake up and ask myself, am I doing enough? And I want to ask us today, are our actions helping to create a better world for our nation's children? What more can we do to support the most vulnerable children in society? Can we re-enter the adoption market? Can we re-enter fostering? What more can we do for these children, for all children? How can we build community? Are we doing enough? While I've endeavoured to put children at the heart of everything I've done so far as a Children's Commissioner, I think there's much more to do for me and for all of us. When I speak to children, they're so articulate about what needs to change. They don't just tell me about what's wrong in the world. They tell me about what we could do to make it better. And it's this spirit I want to capture. So over the next few months, and I'm announcing it here, but you'll see it in the press tomorrow, I'm launching our new big project, the Big Ambition. We're coming up to an election year, and we're going out to all the children in England, in every institution and in every school. Every head teacher has my email tonight and the survey, and we're talking to children about what do they want the next Prime Minister to do for them in the next election. What do they feel could be done? It's solutions, not what's wrong, to make the world better for children. So watch this space. We're going to be everywhere. We're visiting Durham, and we're going to be all over the country now till Christmas. And so please do watch out for it, and parents can fill it in as well. So we're really keen for you to do that. It's an opportunity to hear from all children in every part of the country, in every setting, and we'll be using what the children say to shape the national conversation to ensure that their voices are reflected in the decisions that are going to affect them. I want them, the children, in front of the cabinet, in front of the shadow cabinet with the MPs. And I do think the Catholic Union Board are going to need to meet them too. We want to influence leaders and decision makers, and children are so much more eloquent than adults. They'll really give us a good, tell us what they need. So on that note, I felt it was only appropriate to end my remarks today with the words of children. So I wanted to share a quote with you from the Big Ask that I carry around, and use all the time. I carry around in my heart every day. When we asked children what was holding them back in England, a 16-year-old boy told us something sad. He said the social stigma of children from lower class backgrounds trying to achieve something bigger than themselves. It's 2021 when I asked that. Let me repeat it one more time. This young child was saying to me that the biggest thing he worried about was the stigma of children from lower class backgrounds trying to achieve something bigger than themselves. We should tell him, of course, there is nothing bigger than the lives of children. So not to scorn ambition, we could try to build something equal to it. Now, it's my mission to make England the best place in the world for children to grow up. I hope you'll join me in the months and years ahead to achieve this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dame Rachel. That was truly superb, inspirational, clearly very personal and passionate, and your authentic faith shines through. You're obviously the right person for this job. And actually, I was thinking all the time through almost every sentence, what could be more authentically Christian or Catholic than to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. So we're very lucky to have you in that role. You probably want a break, but you've agreed to take some questions. And also, I think you've kindly agreed for your text to be published.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be great, because I'm sure we want to read it again. Yeah. And just to say, on the broader subject of society and the family, we are setting up a special committee within the union to focus on that. We're very good at, we think, at education and life and medical things, but we're going to put a big push on that. So I'm also looking for experts, volunteers, contributors to help with that committee. So don't be shy. None of you are, of course, but you know. All right. So first question. I know that Claire has a question. Great, thank you. And James is bringing the mic. Claire Thomas, who is a vice chairman of the union.
Thank you very much, Dame Rachel. You quoted one of your young survey respondents as saying that a loving family life being worth more than money. But others are saying they want lots of fun activities and crucially to be kept safe. What more can be done to realise their dreams and support loving family life? The Catholic Union has been campaigning to make our tax and benefit system fairer for families such as this. How best can we work for good success in this area?
Yeah, so I mean, I have made a serious study of many European countries, some like Hungary in particular, who whatever one's view of the wider political issues, if you look at Hungary and what they do to support their families and to support families with children, it's absolutely amazing. I think I would ask our government to have a look at those family-friendly policies, both taxation, but also just really encouraging family life, families, and giving the tax breaks and things like extending parental leave, ensuring there's parental leave. So I mean, I think there are some really good case studies now that are showing they can actually reverse the decline in growing families, and I'm sure we could learn a lot from them. The Hungarian ambassador will like that answer, I'm sure.
Take a question from the back. Okay, yeah, go ahead. You just say your name first, please.
Okay, thank you, Dame Rachel. My name is Anna Mulrooney. Obviously, I was born up, because you detect my accent, I was born in the north of Ireland. I came across to London to study. I met my husband, and consequently, I lived in Shropshire, Suffolk. Beautiful, lovely places like Staffordshire, etc. Then I spent 6 years in Paris and 8 years in Malaysia. So you very succinctly mentioned about immigration, and you very, very poignantly mentioned about adoption, etc. So my experience is two beautiful gay people who adopted a gay boy in Malaysia, and he is now living here, and he is being very well looked after. And I really struggle with the fact, really sadly, that your only experience is that you've lived in the UK. I have lived in Malaysia for 8 years, and I've lived in France for 6 years, and I have lived an expat life, a colonial life, yeah, and it was very privileged. I really struggle 100% with the fact that there's a lot of stuff that's not addressed. And I loved tonight's declaration, and I love what you're saying. I do believe it's a bit naive, and I am 100% Catholic. So going back to what the Catholic congregation should be doing regarding immigration and regarding anything to do with adoption, I would like, and this is my question to you, I would like to know why and how any Catholic opinion is going to be addressed by any, should we say, governmental body, because currently we have a lot of Indian investment in the UK. We have currently today listened to question time regarding anything to do with.
Could you just come to your question?
Okay, my question
It's
is.
gotta be a question.
My question is, okay, my question is, because I am a Catholic and a practicing Catholic, as all of you are, my question is, how do you see Catholicism influencing anything in government, either conservative
Okay, lovely. Thank
or
you. That's your
liberal
question. Thank you
or
very much.
democratic? And can I just say one other thing? One other thing.
Can you let Rachel answer?
When I was growing up,
Lots of people want to
when
ask
I was growing up,
questions.
John Hume was the person that I relied on and my family relied on. SDLP. John Hume.
Do you have any
So where's John Hume in anything to do with anything today?
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just make a general comment that people can make comments, but please come to your question quickly, because I know there are about 20 people who want to ask a question. Do you have an answer?
I'm not quite sure what the,
Right.
yeah, could we?
Okay.
Question is,
All right. But
Liberal Democrat.
thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question.
Hi, my name's Michael Barrett. I'm lucky enough to be chair of two charities actually working for children. One is Spurgeon's, and I think I'm the first Catholic chair of a Baptist charity.
Excellent.
But I'm also very lucky to be chair of Adoption UK. And Adoption UK supports adoptees and adopters of all ethnicities,
Right.
all genders, all forms of sexuality. And I totally agree with you, the Catholic Church is coming to certain adoption state. So what would St. Ignatius say to the bishops of England and Wales if he was storming over the bridge about adoption?
Can you repeat the question, please? Because it wasn't on the mic, so can you just summarize the question?
I think what you were asking me is it's about getting Catholics back into the adoption space and how we can do that. I actually think there's quite a complex history as to why Catholic Charities moved out of that space, but we do need them back in. If there's one thing I think that my messaging has been today, it's about children needing loving families, and that's the most important thing, and that can come in many shapes and sizes. So I think the bishops should be storming heaven and encouraging it's both you, but also it's the cross. It's great to see the collaboration there and the inter-Christian work there, but should absolutely be getting back into the field. We desperately need foster carers, more adopters, we need families for children. So I think that's my message. Come back.
Sorry, you are
Thank you.
absolutely.
No,
Thank you. You've had your say. Thank you very much. James, can you please be reasonable?
3 days.
There are lots of people who want to answer questions.
And the only question that was asked was, do you have a sofa and will you leave it to him? And I am sorry, you are wrong in so many levels.
Sorry about this.
It's okay, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Can we go to the next question? If you could keep your questions short without a commentary. Professor John Lydon of St. Mary's University.
Thank you very much, Richard. Dame Rachel, would you agree that faith schools, in fact, you've said that already, or schools with religious character, more correctly, are a force for good, and you made that clear. So do you agree that we should be doing everything we can to support them, including lifting the faith cap? And I must make this clear what I'm speaking about here. The 50% cap on admission to academies and free schools, which the Catholic Union has been calling for.
Yeah, this is obviously a complex one. And there are a range of different views as to why people might not or not. But I mean, personally, I have argued for the lifting of the cap. That's a personal view. That's me speaking as Rachel, not the Children's Commissioner, because I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to do that as Children's Commissioner. And mainly on the grounds of how inclusive Catholic schools are. If you look at the inclusivity and the levels of diversity and the openness, I feel really comfortable in supporting that, and I have spoken about it before. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. If you just say your name and keep the question short. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Lee. I'm a performer and I work partly in secure children's homes. These are places for children who've committed grave offences, including murder, between the age of 10 to 16. And my clients there, the teachers, tell me they've got two concerns. One is, paradoxically, how short a time they have to work with these young people. These children have often been out of school forever, really. They do train them, they do equip them, they help them have a trade, so there's a real chance of people getting a job. So one issue is the sentences are too short to be redemptive. And secondly, there's hardly any support when the children leave. They're not going to go back to school. One boy, last story, one boy, several children barricade themselves in because they don't want to be sent home. So what can be done to support young people in secure children's homes, please?
Yeah, secure children's homes and the entire secure estate is a concern. Just to take this from the children's perspective, so when I was in Feltham recently, Young Offenders Institute, I talked to all the boys there. They are boys, they're 6'2", a lot of them, but they're boys. And I said to them, asked them, all of them, when was the last time you felt happy and comfortable at school, right? And it was going well. And they were mainly 16, 17-year-olds. You know, most of them going to be sent on to adult prisons. The answer was year 5 or 6. So that's top primary. And that's when, you know, so in terms of when do we need to start working with these children? We actually need to start working with these children in diversion in primary school. It's almost too late, you know, as you say, when you get there. The second question I asked the boys at Feltham was, what's the plan? You know, most of you are out at 25 or 26 years old. Some of them are on remand and out. For all of them, it was some sort of answer around education, a trade, a job. So I think we need to take that really seriously. I think proper rehabilitation, management of the trauma. When you're talking to a boy who basically, you know, was stealing for his mum, you know, his mother was making him do it, you're looking at a level of trauma that, and I think the answer to these questions often come back, we look at the children's experience. So I have consistently called for more support, for joined up support when children leave institutions, whether it's secure mental health wards or prison. And frankly, it is a matter of luck where you end up, whether you end up in a secure mental health ward or a prison or another kind of institution, just depends which way you get picked up. So I think services working together and really supporting children as they come out. Last secure mental health ward I was in was at the Maudsley. I went to the Maudsley to see the children there. And the Maudsley staff were like, we can do a great job here, but when they go out, the joined up work isn't there. So just as in that answer around attendance, needing all the agencies working around the children, coalescing around the child, we need to do the same thing in this case. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got an interesting question from Michael Gresson, who's joining us online. Quite a different area, in fact. He says that national and local authorities' priorities are directed towards the most vulnerable and disadvantaged. But what about the most able who come from disadvantaged backgrounds to help them to reach their full potential? What priority would you give to this category of students? I mean, how should it be handled?
Yes, so one of the things about our school system now is there is some real diversity in the school system. So I set up a maths and science free school for the most able 16 to 18-year-olds in the middle of my, for any child from Norfolk or Suffolk who had that talent and ability. Now, most of my schools were sponsored academies for the whole community in disadvantaged areas, but we recognised with the energy industry, on the shore with the John Innes Centre and all the development in Norfolk, that there was a real need to create the Sir Isaac Newtons of the future and to actually start really seeding that. So I think yesterday I was at Westminster Academy, Harris Academy, a 16 to 18-year-old sixth form that draws children from right across London, from every kind of background, but it's mainly from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they're getting an absolute rocket boost of a sixth form education and going on to the best universities. I think the system does allow us to do that both within our larger inclusive schools and whatever, and of course they should be prioritised. What we think about the nuns, it was the standards. How far can you reach? What can you do? Fulfill your potential. That's absolutely what we should be doing.
There are a lot of hands going up. We're going to go to the back of the room now, please. Gentlemen on the right. James. Again, if you could keep your question fairly brief and say your name at the outset.
Thomas Chaco, you said how the children you surveyed focused heavily on wanting to get a good job, and you talked about that as sort of commendable ambition.
Yeah.
But you also said it wasn't how you were when you are their age.
Yeah.
Could that itself be seen as a rise in anxiety or linked to the decline in general social support that you described?
I think it does. Thank you. That's a great question. I think it does. It does indicate perhaps a sense of children picking up that worry about the world, which I see a lot. They listen to the messages. The messages on social media and from the TV are 24/7. Do you remember we were only allowed an hour of TV at tea time? Do you remember that? Yeah, and then it had to go off. I mean, their lives are very, very different. And I do think we have to be prepared to support them with that kind of concern. Like I say, 8 and 9-year-olds, I love some ambition, but when I've got 8 and 9-year-olds worrying about whether they'll get the job they want, that feels like the balance isn't right. On the other hand, I think we do need better careers advice for children in school so that they can really understand the breadth of opportunities available to them. And that has to be a priority. All those youngsters wanting to do skilled jobs and local things in their own community, we need to be kind of rocket boosting that.
Thank you. Rosemary Keenan.
Thank you. I agree with everything that you've been saying. And my name's Dr. Rosemary Keenan. I'm former Chief Executive of a Catholic Children's Society. And I have to say you're absolutely right about adoption. Adoption is not economically viable, I think, for Catholic agencies, and I'm happy to tell you why I think that's the case. But I want to go back to that child, the boy, was he 16? Right at the very end. And what I find so tragic is that what he's an example of is someone who, and children learn it very early, learn their sense of place within society. And I think this is where there's an area that you haven't covered.
Yeah.
And that's to do with state neglect. And neglect in the sense of assisting children that are in poverty and not creating the right environment and conditions of work for their parents. And this, I think, feeds into what you're talking about with the children that are worried about the jobs they're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need to be ones that provide security and an income that will feed them, that will house them, provide them with all the necessities. And the thing that I really want to ask you about is, today, I know from experience a couple of years back before I retired, that many of our children are going to school
with empty stomachs, who have no room in which to learn quietly at home, no access to the internet. And it's only through probably education and employment that the church, that the state is going to address those issues. And you didn't mention state. You talked about family, community, parishes. And I think we need to start expecting more from our politicians and saying, you have responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of Michael Sandel, who said, if I say to you, vote for me and I will give you £10,000, or I say to you, vote for me and I will save you money on your taxes, what's the difference in terms of corruption?
Mm.
And I think the British public have a duty as well. And I think you're right to talk about community, but I think the state is the level where we go in. And I'd like your views on that.
Yeah,
and about the issue of
so it's interesting.
Poverty.
Yeah, it's interesting that when we got the responses from the children, we were all over it to look for, because we thought where's the stuff about money? Because it didn't, and actually where we found it was in in the text responses where they talked about worries about their parents, worries about their parents' jobs, worries about, so it did come through that way. We were like, where is it? Because we were expecting that. When I did the family review, the two big issues from adults in the country were cost of living and cost of childcare. They were the two biggest issues. So of course, my answer is, of course, cost of living crisis and poverty needs addressing by the state, and we need to make sure, we need to look at benefit system, and we've argued consistently for things like free school meals, for extended preschool meals, for breakfast clubs, for a range of things, and more thoroughgoing things with DWP about how to address, I've particularly pushed DWP on families with children and addressing poverty there, and it needs doing.
But that wraparound care and parents working all the hours God sends in multiple jobs does not facilitate, as you know, the care and love that parents need to be sharing with their children, because they haven't got the time for it.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, fine. Next.
We're going to go to our next question. Anthony McLaren, St Mary's University.
Thank you, Dame Rachel, very much for that, for the analysis that you gave of the key ways in which we can make this, as you say, the best place in the world to grow up as a child. I'm particularly interested, as Richard just said, I'm Vice Chancellor of St Mary's University. In a previous role, I was Chair of Governors of a large Anglican and Catholic joint academy, 11 to initially 16 and 18, and then 18. And what impressed me enormously was the way in which that school engaged with parents. And in a way, the parents who wished to be engaged with were the easy part of the issue. And parents who were more reluctant, for whatever reason, maybe time, as just been mentioned, to engage, were much more difficult. In your experience as Children's Commissioner, the huge amount of data you now have from the responses that you got, but also in your experience as head teacher, your first pillar was schools, education, and your second was families. How do they work together most effectively? And what can schools do to make that relationship as effective as possible?
I think, you're absolutely right. The relationship, the three-way relationship between school, child, and family is absolutely critical. I think we learned a lot during the pandemic. I think we learned a lot about how to engage parents who are busy parents in different ways, particularly using digital means. But I think it's absolutely essential. And one of the things we're doing for the first time is really going out and asking parents this question in the latest survey we're doing. When I've convened parents, you know, right across the country, when we've done parents groups for the family review, a lot of them talk about the need for connection and connecting up with the services and the support and how to do that. And I think it's a genuine challenge in a society where we are all working, you know, 24/7, where you've got low paid parents having to work day and night and sort of tag team on the children. So there are some particular concerns there. But again, I think schools are getting better at both being open at times, you know, that are useful for parents, and I think using digital. I think the new family hubs model is a really good one for trying to do more of this. I've been pushing really hard to get family hubs, because parents told me the two places they trusted in the family review were schools and GPs. So we're working really hard to get more of those family hubs on school sites. So the kind of very good early help work, where often parents are really engaged, could be extended through to teenagers. So I think there is a structure starting to grow, and with the changes, you know, the latest social care paper, children's social care paper, I think there's that focus on early help. Family hubs gives us a structure that we can work through, but we need to take it right through to teenagers. Often the problem starts after primary in terms of interaction. So that would be mine.
We're going to take one last question, because Dame Rachel's been talking for a very long time. We're most grateful. Lady at the back in the middle, you've been very patient. If you just say your name, please.
My name is Gillian Vanderland, and I've got I have 5 children, just briefly 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and I've got 4 great-grandchildren. So the age spectrum is quite wide.
Speak into the microphone, please.
I want to ask one thing of you, really. Your role is billed as protecting and correcting the rights of children. Isn't that right?
So it's promoting and protecting the rights of children, but it's also, I mean, there's a range of responsibilities in statute.
Yes, but when it comes to rights, it comes to government policy, what you can and what you can't do. I don't know whether other people are concerned about this, but some of the things that are happening in schools, and I get quite a big feedback because of the wide range of children. Also, I went into teaching as well, so I can add that a little bit too. But some government policies have undermined the role of the parent to such an extent that parents are desperately worried. The sort of 50-year-old, 40-year-old, 30-year-old parents are desperately worried about what is being taken away of their basic right. Now, do you fight for those sort of rights? Are you engaged with those sort of rights? In fact, there's a particular vulnerable group of children who have actually, because of the equality laws and because of the protected characteristics, which are basically sex orientated. I have to say this, and I'm not in any way phobic about X, Y, and Z in that respect. But the fact of the matter is, it's putting parents and teachers and schools into the most impossible situation. It's causing major divisions in families too.
Thank you. So thanks for your question. And I think, I mean, to summarize, I think what you're referring to are some of the issues that we've seen around trans guidance and children's social transitioning without parents knowing, and around RSHE. I was asked by government to give some guidance on RSHE, on relationships and sex education, and I strongly advise them that all materials should be transparent, that parents should be able to see everything, be briefed on everything. Parents are key partners in a child's growing up. There has been an independent panel look at the wider issues. The government have delayed responding to it. My view is that, well, they need to respond, and they need to respond quickly, because But first on safeguarding grounds, I think you would probably be able to give lots of examples. There are lots of examples around just worries around safeguarding issues that heads need and families need to feel secure about. I think also consistency. We've got 23,000 schools and every head is having to think about how to deal with these situations, no doubt giving the best pastoral response, but actually needing firm guidance on that. And I think fairness. I think children really see when things are fair, when they're different in different places, they're not fair. So we need that guidance. We need it quickly. And parents are a key part of, I mean, there's just no question. You can't give a teaspoon of medicine to a child without permission in a school. You certainly shouldn't be able to teach them, you know, material about relationships that they haven't seen, and they should be, you know, absolutely that they are their children's first teachers and should have primacy.
Thank you very much. Well, Dame Rachel, and we could go on for a very long time. I'm sure there are many more questions. It's an endless subject. We do appreciate you fitting us into your enormously busy program. Lots to think about. Please do continue to support the union in your way. And I'm sure we'll be calling upon you as we develop our Society and Family Committee. Just to say that this is one of several events that we hold every year at the union. They're open public events, which have pros and cons, as we all know. You're always welcome. Just sign up online. First of all, 11th of October, Professor Stephen Bullivant will be speaking at one of our pub talks, addressing the theme of Is Britain a Christian Country? 17th of October, Raymond Friel will be taking part in a webinar on his new book about Catholic social teaching. And of course, you're all excited about our AGM on the 28th of November. All of these things are on our website. All of these things are in the week bulletin. Please sign up for that. And also, I can't say goodbye without asking you to give some money if you can. Please donate via the website. We're not supported by any official authorities. It's through private subscription, private donation. And that's all I have to say. Nearly 8 o'clock. I think that's enough. Enjoy a drink now. Goodbye. Give me a bottle of whiskey.
Oh my God.
I do like red, actually.
Right, you two failed. You should have had her out the door.
Thank you very much.